Hello, happy gardeners, and welcome back to Southwest Victory Gardens, your resource for organic gardening here in the desert Southwest. On this channel, you will learn all about backyard gardening in desert climates, using fewer resources, fewer inputs, less water, and all while doing so while living in harmony with our Sonora Desert ecosystem. So welcome back to the Nuestra Tierra Garden. This is our second video on potting mixes. In the first video, which I put a link to in the description down below, I told you all about why it is beneficial to make your own potting mixes from scratch and how we can basically use 4 different ingredients mixed in different amounts to give us a variety of different potting mixes that we can use in different applications. So, the first mix that I want to talk to y'all about is going to be what I call the greenhouse mix. So the greenhouse mix works really well for that exact application. If you're going to be growing in a greenhouse and you need a mix that's going to be very light, so seeds can obviously grow into it, but it's also going to be very nutrient dense. So this mix is very nutrient dense. It contains a lot of fertilizer in it. Doesn't contain very much compost, but it's got a lot of fertilizer, because if you're going to be growing young seedlings and they're going to be in the greenhouse for 6, 8, 10 weeks or even longer, you're going to need a lot of fertilizer in that mix in order to get those plants growing for that entire time. So because that this mix uses mostly coconut and a lot of fertilizer, it's going to be a lot more expensive than traditional potting mixes that you would either buy over the counter or that you would make from scratch. So you want to use this mix in limited quantities, and you want to make sure that if you do use it and you have any extra left over, that you save it and that you reuse it as much as possible to try and save yourself some money. So let's go look at this particular recipe and we're going to see what we're working with here. All right, so number 1, coconut husk, which we know about. We're going to use 2 parts coconut husk in this recipe, okay? Specifically, Coco-Peat. So Coco-Peat is the finest texture of coconut husk, and it works really well for this application. It's very, it's a lot lighter, and it's going to be a little bit more dense than the other varieties of coconut husk, so it works really good for very small pots and small containers. So as you can see, our parts are 5-gallon buckets, but if you're using yogurt containers or coffee cans or wheelbarrows, as long as you use the same ratio, you're going to be good. So today we're using 5-gallon containers for our part, but you can use whatever you like. So 2 parts Coco-Peat, 1 part compost. So you can see compost here, we're only going to be using 1 part, and you can make your own compost from scratch, or you can go out and buy a compost like, say, Tank's Green Stuff or something like that. Now we're also going to be using a half a part each vermiculite on the left and perlite on the right. So 1/2 part each, totaling 1 part. So this equals 20 gallons total. So we have 2 parts coconut, 1 part compost, a half part each vermiculite and perlite. We mix that ratio together, and that gives us our greenhouse mix. Now, the most important part, for every 5 gallons of this mix, you're going to want to add 1 pound of Bio-Live fertilizer, okay? Now, why Bio-Live? Well, you can use any organic fertilizer that you like. And if you have one that you know works well for you, then by all means, go ahead and use it. But if we're going to be using this mix in the greenhouse, okay, then we got to be really careful that we don't use any organic fertilizers that inhibit seed germination, right? Because if we're inhibiting seed germination, that's going to defeat the purpose of a greenhouse potting mix, right? So we don't want that. So there are lots of fertilizers that are organic that inhibit seed germination. So soybean meal, for example, corn gluten meal is another. Some of those products are actually sold as weed killers or as herbicides. So even though they're organic fertilizers, they actually inhibit seed germination, so we do not want to use those products. So you're going to need to do a little bit of information on which fertilizers will work, but I know for a fact Bio-Live works, and I really like it, so I use it in this application, and I've never had a problem with it. So again, for every 5 gallons of potting soil that we make, we're going to add 1 pound of Bio-Live Fertilizer, which means for this quantity right here, we have 5, 10, 15, 20 gallons. We're going to add 4 pounds of the Bio-Live Fertilizer, right? And again, Bio-Live's a little bit more expensive. Even when we buy it in these 50-pound bags, it's over $1 a pound. So that's going to add, again, to the cost of our mix. All right, so you see I have the cement mixer here. You don't need the cement mixer if you're going to be doing small quantities. You can just dump these all out on the tarp, mix them together with a hoe, and you're good to go. But because I'm going to be making a lot of mix, I'm going to go ahead and use the cement mixer today. And so I'm going to go ahead and park this mic back on the tripod. You can watch me work for a little while I make some potting mix, and then we're going to be good to go. Now, one more note. The Coco-Peat, you see it comes in a big block like that. Each block's going to give you roughly 2.2, 2.5 cubic feet of coconut. And in order to actually get that coconut, what you have to do is soak that in water. So you see here we have these blue tubs. We put 1 brick of coconut in each one of these big tubs. These tubs hold about 10, 15 gallons. And we fill it with water and let that coconut soak up the water overnight, and then the next day we're able to use that. Now you want to make sure if you're using Coco-Peat, you give yourself enough time to let that those bricks soak up all that water, so then you can go ahead and use it. If you're using other types of coconut like chips and fiber or cocoa chips, it only takes about 5 or 10 minutes to fully soak a brick, whereas Coco-Peat you actually need to let it sit overnight. So thank you for that. Now let's go ahead and take a look at how we make our own potting mix. All right, there you have it. You know, if you're just making a little bit, you don't really need to go through all of that. But like I said, we're going to be going through a lot of this mix. So we grow out 2-inch pots in 10-20 trays. And what I say is roughly with, we can fill each tray with 32 of those small pots, and we can do roughly 6 trays with about 10 gallons of this mix right here. So we can fit roughly 160 trays in our greenhouse, and we may go through roughly 1 cubic yard or a little less of this mix each season. So if you are doing a greenhouse in your school or in your community garden, or just, you know, for your own private, you know, business or whatever, that can give you kind of an idea of just how much of this you'll need, and then that way you can, you know, calculate costs and that sort of thing. So again, you know, we use roughly 10 gallons of this mix for every 6 of the 10-20 trays that we fill, and that's just kind of a ballpark estimate. One thing I didn't mention is that you really want to be, when you're using the perlite specifically, but with any of these things that can be dusty, the fertilizer, the compost, whatever, strongly encourage you to wear some sort of respiratory protection, just a dust mask, a bandana at the very least. One thing I like to do is just wet down the perlite. So I have these buckets with holes drilled in them, and I just wet down the perlite, and then I collect the water and just reuse that as best as I can. And we'll show you those buckets actually in the next video if you want to check that out. little teaser there. So we got enough greenhouse mix behind us. We filled up one of our city trash cans. You can get these from the city at the Los Reales landfill. They're great to repurpose for compost bins and all sorts of other stuff like that. And we still got a lot more to make, but I just wanted to show you a little bit about how we do it, how we do this, specifically the greenhouse mix, and what we use that for. Again, is mostly in our greenhouse, because it's such a, again, I don't want to say that it's like super expensive. I mean, it's not going to be like $25 a bag like, that Fox Farm stuff, but it's more expensive than just regular potting soil that you can make with a little more compost and a cheaper fertilizer. So if you use a free compost, if you use less coconut, and you find a cheaper fertilizer, you can make the cost of that mix go down a little bit. So so yeah, if you have any other questions or comments, please just leave those comments down below. I love to hear how you make your greenhouse mix, what kind of fertilizers you use, what you've had success with. And in the next video, we're going to show you how to make more of an all-purpose potting soil. Definitely going to be a lot cheaper, and it's going to be able to be used in a lot more applications than just the greenhouse. So check out that next video. All right, we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.